Okay, now we're going to talk about the history of ambient music as a celebration and promotion of Robert Fripp and Brian Eno's magnificent 2004 release, The Equatorial Stars. For this occasion, we're going to be reading out aloud the history of ambient music. In my opinion, one of the more interesting and even captivating, maybe that seems baffling to the uninitiated, although I don't think it requires a true initiation or elitism or anything special and some new way of thinking in order to appreciate ambient music. If anything, ambient music is the easiest music to appreciate because it doesn't require active listening in any way, shape, or form, and actually active listening might injure the appreciation of ambient music. So that being said, let's begin. Ambient music is a genre of music that emphasizes tone and atmosphere over traditional musical structure or rhythm. It may lack net composition, beat, or structured melody. It uses textural layers of sound that can reward both passive and active listening and encourage a sense of calm or contemplation. The genre is said to evoke an atmospheric, visual, or unobtrusive quality. Nature soundscapes may be included, and the sounds of acoustic instruments such as the piano, strings, and flute may be emulated through a synthesizer. The genre originated in the 1960s and 1970s, when new musical instruments were being introduced to a wider market, such as the synthesizer. It was presaged by Erik Satie's furniture music and styles such as musique concrete, minimal music, and German electronic music, but was prominently named and popularized by British musician Brian Eno in 1978 with his album Ambient 1, Music for Airports. Eno opined that ambient music must be as ignorable as it is interesting. It saw a revival towards the late 1980s with the prominence of house and techno music, growing a cult following by the 1990s. Ambient music may have elements of new age music and drone music, as some works may use sustained or repeated notes. Ambient music did not achieve large commercial success, being criticized as everything from dolled-up new age to boring and irrelevant technical noodling. Nevertheless, it has attained a certain degree of acclaim throughout the years, especially in the internet age. Due to its relatively open style, ambient music often takes influences from many other genres ranging from classical, avant-garde music, folk, jazz, and world music, amongst others. The early 20th century French composer Erik Satie used such Dadaist-inspired explorations to explore an early form of ambient/background music that he labelled furniture music. This he described as being the sort of music that could be played during a dinner to create a background atmosphere for that activity rather than serving as the focus of attention. In his own words, Satie sought to create a music which will be part of the noises of the environment, which will take them into consideration. I think of it as melodious, softening the noises of the knives and forks at dinner, not dominating them, not imposing itself. It would fill up those heavy silences that sometimes fall between friends dining together. It would spare them the trouble of paying attention to their own banal remarks. And at the same time it would neutralize the street noises which so indiscreetly enter into the play of conversation. To make such music would be to respond to a need. According to a 1998 article in The Wire, Blind Willie Johnson's 1928 single Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground could be filed under ambient music, deeming it a piece of country gospel improvisation, slide guitar with vocal hums and moans but no lyrics. In 1948, French composer and engineer Pierre Schaeffer coined the term musique concrete. This experimental style of music used recordings of natural sounds that were then modified, manipulated, or affected to create a composition. Schaeffer's techniques of using tape loops and splicing are considered to be the precursor to modern-day sampling. In 1952, John Cage released his famous free movement composition 4:33, which is a performance of complete silence for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. The piece is intended to capture the ambient sounds of the venue/location of the performance and have that be the music played. Cage has been cited by seminal artists such as Brian Eno as influence. In the 1960s, many music groups experimented with unusual methods, with some of them creating what would later be called ambient music. In the summer of 1962, composers Ramon Sender and Morton Subotnick, his genius, founded the San Francisco Tape Music Center, which functioned both as an electronic music studio and concert venue. Other composers working with tape recorders became members and collaborators, including Pauline Oliveros, Terry Riley, and Steve Reich. Their compositions, among others, contributed to the development of minimal music, also called minimalism, which shares many similar concepts to ambient music, such as repetitive patterns or pulses, steady drones, and consonant harmony. Many records were released in Europe and the United States of America between the mid-1960s and the mid-1990s that established the conventions of the ambient genre in the Anglophone popular music market. Some 1960s records of ambient elements include Music for Yoga Meditation and Other Joys and Music for Zen Meditation by Tony Scott, Soothing Sounds for Baby by Raymond Scott, and the first of the Environments album series by Irv Tabel. In the late 1960s, French composer Éliane Radiguet composed several pieces by processing tape loops from the feedback between two tape recorders and a microphone. In the 1970s, she then went on to compose similar music almost exclusively with an ARP 2500 synthesizer, and her long, slow compositions have often been compared to drone music. In 1969, the group COUM Transmissions, that's an early form of throwing gristle actually, were performing sonic experiments in British art schools. Pearls Before Swine's 1968 album Balaclava, don't think I'm very familiar with that, okay, features the sounds of birdsong and ocean noise, which went on to become tropes of ambient music. Developing in the 1970s, ambient music stemmed from the experimental and synthesizer-oriented styles of the period. Between 1974 and 1976, American composer Laurie Spiegel created her seminal work The Expanding Universe, created on a computer-analog hybrid system called Groove. In 1977, her composition Music of the Spheres was included on Voyager 1 and 2's Golden Record. In April 1975, Suzanne Ciani gave two performances on her Buchla synthesizer, one at the WBAI Free Music Store and one at Phil Niblock's Loft. These performances were released on an archival album in 2016 entitled Buchla Concerts 1975. According to the record label, these concerts were part live presentation, part grant application, and part educational demonstration. However, it wasn't until Brian Eno coined the term in the mid-70s that ambient music was defined as a genre. Eno went on to record 1975's discrete music with this in mind, suggesting that it be listened to at comparatively low levels, even to the extent that it frequently falls below the threshold of audibility, referring to Satie's quote about his musique de ameublement. Other contemporaneous musicians creating ambient-style music at the time included Japanese electronic music composers such as Isao Tomita and Ryuichi Sakamoto. It's one of the three guys in Yellow Magic Orchestra, obviously, as well as the psychoacoustic soundscapes of Irv Table's Environment series, and German experimental bands such as Popol Vuh, Geniuses, Cluster, Geniuses, Kraftwerk, Geniuses, Harmonia. I believe Eno was with Harmonia for a brief period. Ashra Temple, Geniuses, and Tangerine Dream, at one time Geniuses as well. Mike Orm of Stylus magazine describes the work of Berlin School musicians as laying the groundwork for ambient. The impact the rise of the synthesizer in modern music had on ambient as a genre cannot be overstated. As Ralph Hutter of early electronic pioneers Kraftwerk said in a 1977 Billboard interview, electronics is beyond nations and colours. With electronics everything is possible. The only limit is with the composer. The Yellow Magic Orchestra developed a distinct style of ambient electronic music that would later be developed into ambient house music. So as we said, the English producer Brian Eno is credited with coining the term ambient music in the mid-1970s. He said other artists had been creating similar music, but that I just gave it a name, which is exactly what it needed. By naming something, you create a difference. You say that this is now real. Names are very important. He used the term to describe music that is different from forms of canned music like Muzak. Muzak is good, by the way. Go listen to some 1970s shopping mall Muzak. It's just objectively beautiful music at this point in time, I think anyway. In the liner notes for his 1978 album Ambient One Music for Airports, Eno wrote, I've probably read this aloud before in the Ambient One review upload, we'll read this out again though. Whereas the extant canned music companies proceed from the basis of regularizing environments by blanketing their acoustic and atmospheric idiosyncrasies, ambient music is intended to enhance these. Whereas conventional background music is produced by stripping away all sense of doubt and uncertainty, and thus all genuine interest from the music, ambient music retains these qualities, and whereas their intention is to brighten the environment by adding stimulus to it, thus supposedly alleviating the tedium of routine tasks and levelling out the natural ups and downs of the body rhythms, ambient music is intended to induce calm and a space to think. Ambient music must be able to accommodate many levels of listening attention without enforcing one in particular. It must be as ignorable as it is interesting. Eno, who describes himself as a non-musician, termed his experiments treatments rather than traditional performances. In the late 70s, New Age musician Lyra began busting in New York parks and sidewalks, including Washington Square Park. Excuse me. It was there that Brian Eno heard Lyra playing and asked him if he'd like to record an album. Day of Radiance, released in 1980, was the third album in Eno's ambient series. Although Lyra had already recorded a number of albums, this one gave him international recognition. Unlike other albums in the series, Day of Radiance featured mostly acoustic instruments instead of electronics. In the mid-1980s, the possibilities to create a sonic landscape increased through the use of sampling. By the late 1980s, there was a steep increase in the incorporation of the computer in the writing and recording process of records. The 16-bit Macintosh platform with built-in sound and comparable IBM models would find themselves in studios and homes of musicians and record makers. However, many artists were still working with analog synthesizers and acoustic instruments to produce ambient works. In 1983, Midori Takada recorded her first solo LP, Through the Looking Glass, in 2 days. She performed all parts on the album with diverse instrumentation, including percussion, marimba, gong, reed organ, bells, ocarina, vibraphone, piano, and glass Coca-Cola bottles. Between 1988 and 1993, Eliane Radegui produced 3 hour-long works on the ARP 2500, which were subsequently issued together as La Trilogie de la Mort. Also in 1988, founding member and director of the San Francisco Tape Music Center, Pauline Oliveros, coined the term deep listening after she recorded an album inside a huge underground cistern in Washington, which has a 45-second reverberation time. The concept of deep listening then went on to become an aesthetic based upon principles of improvisation, electronic music, ritual, teaching, and meditation. By the early 1990s, artists such as the Orb, Aphex Twin, Seafeel, The Irresistible Force, Biosphere, and the Higher Intelligence Agency gained commercial success and were being referred to by the popular music press as ambient house, ambient techno, IDM, intelligent dance music, or simply ambient. The term chill-out emerged from British ecstasy culture, which was originally applied in relaxed, down-tempo chill-out rooms outside of the main dance floor, where ambient dub and down-tempo beats were played to ease the tripping mind. London artists such as Aphex Twin, specifically Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, 1994, Global Communication, 7614, 1994, The Future Sound of London, Lifeforms, 1994, ISDN, 1994, The Black Dog, Temple of Transparent Balls, 1993, Autocare, Incarnabula, 1993, Amber, 1994, Boards of Canada, and the KLF's Chill Out, 1990. That's a masterpiece of an album if there ever was one. Oh my god, the KLF were beyond genius, and the Chill Out and White Room as well, but Chill Out's so good, you have no idea. I mean, if you've heard it, you have an idea, but listen to the original, don't listen to the compromised official re-upload where they had to remove certain samples, because the laws have changed since 1990, obviously. All took a part in popularizing and diversifying ambient music where it was used as a calming respite from the intensity of the hardcore and techno popular at the time. Other global ambient artists from the 1990s include American composers Stars of the Lid, who released 5 albums during this decade, and Japanese artist Susumu Yokota, whose album Sakura 1999 featured what Pitchfork magazine called dreamy processed guitar as a distinctive sound tool. Yokota's albums from around that point onward are very, I guess you could say, ambient and or new age focused. They're much slower, because in 1994 he has the album Acid Mount Fuji, which is as good as 1990s feel-good, trippy, psych, techno music has ever gotten. Few albums are more entertaining under the influence of psychotropics, I'll say that much. By the late 2000s and 2010s, ambient music also gained widespread recognition on YouTube, with uploaded pieces usually ranging from 1 to 8 hours long, getting over millions of hits. Such videos are usually titled or are generally known as relaxing music and may be influenced by other music genres. Ambient videos assist online listeners with yoga, study, sleep, see music and sleep, massage, meditation, and gaining optimism, inspiration, and creating peaceful atmosphere in their rooms or other environments. Many uploaded ambient videos tend to be influenced by biomusic, where they feature sounds of nature, though the sounds would be modified with reverbs and delay units to make spacey versions of the sounds as part of the ambience. Such natural sounds oftentimes include those of a beach, rainforest, thunderstorm, and rainfall, among others, with vocalizations of animals such as bird songs being used as well. Pieces contain binaural beats are common and popular uploads as well, which provide music therapy and stress management for the listener. iTunes and Spotify have digital radio stations that feature ambient music, which are mostly produced by independent labels. Acclaimed ambient music of this era, according to Pitchfork magazine, include works by Max Richter, Juliana Barwick, Grouper's good, William Basinski, that's pretty interesting stuff, Onohetrix Point Never, that's some pretty good stuff, obviously, interesting work, and The Caretaker. This is romance, let us be heaven-bound here. This is paradise found here. Sweetheart, this is romance. In 2011, American composer Liz Harris, recording as Grouper, released the album AIA, Alien Observer, listed by Pitchfork at number 21 on their 50 Best Ambient Albums of All Time. In 2011, Juliana Barwick released her first full-length album, The Magic Place. Heavily influenced by her childhood experiences in a church choir, Barwick loops her wordless vocals into ethereal soundscapes. It was listed at number 30 on Pitchfork's 50 Best Ambient Albums of All Time. After several self-released albums, Buchla composer, producer, and performer Caitlin Aurelia Smith was signed to independent record label Western Vinyl in 2015. In 2016, she released her second official album, Ears. It paired the Buchla synthesizer with traditional instruments, and her compositions were compared to Laurie Spiegel and Alice Coltrane. Being compared to Alice Coltrane is always a very wonderful thing. Good on you. Caitlin has also collaborated with other well-known Buchla performer Suzanne Ciani. Iggy Pop's 2019 album, Free, he's still around. And Only the Idiot is a really good Iggy Pop solo album, and that's not really his. It's David Bowie and Eno's. Though some have said Pop contributed more to it than is given credit for. But it just makes you wonder, like, why didn't he do anything interesting for the rest of his career? Lust for Life's okay, I guess, but I don't know. Yeah, Iggy Pop's 2019 album Free features ambient soundscapes. Why is that worth mentioning here, though? Molsoft, a subgenre of vaporwave, features various ambient influences of artists such as Cat, System, Core, and Groceries, exploring ambient sounds typical of malls and grocery stores. There's a few subgenres here that they're talking about, known as ambient dub, ambient house, ambient techno, ambient industrial, ambient pop, and dark ambient, and space music. But I think I'll leave that for you all to explore if you're so inclined. I think my primer in history here, read off from the Free Encyclopedia, is sufficient enough, and taking up too much of your time already, no doubt. So thanks again, my friends. Immensely appreciate if you have taken the time to listen to this upload. Appreciate it. Have the best possible day and night you have ever imagined. Thanks again, my friends.